With Hearts Week coming to a close in ESO pretty soon, I'm sure a lot of us have gotten a ton of levels for our companions as well as some great gear to kit them out with. Even if you're seeing this long after Hearts Week ends, you may be wondering what you should do with all of these things you've been unlocking for your companions. Well, a pretty popular way to build your companions is to make them into a healer. And since my name is Doc, your host for all things healing, I figured I'd bring you guys a little video covering everything you need to know about healer companions. Let's start by talking about the gear you're going to be equipping your buddies with. Fortunately, armor weights are pretty straightforward when it comes to companions. When making our friends into healers, we'll want to go with all light armor since it increases healing done by 1% for each piece our companion has equipped. On top of that, companion armor pieces can roll with traits that give them additional stat boosts. There are 3 traits that I think would be useful for your healer to have. Firstly, you've got Augmented, which increases the duration of buffs and debuffs they apply. Second is Quickened, which reduces ability cooldowns. And lastly is Soothing, which simply increases their healing done. There are other traits that I think are pretty good, but these are the 3 that I tend to prioritize when I'm getting companion gear for my healers. I don't think there's necessarily a default best-in-slot combination of these traits, since each companion as well as your goals for that companion are going to be different. Those 3, though, again, I just find are very common on healer companions and can help your companion provide you with even more support. Up next, before we get into each individual buddy and their healing skills, I first want to go over skills that you can find on every companion. Starting with the Restoration Staff skill line, we've got Rejuvenation as a nice little heal over time, Mending Incantation, which is a burst heal with some added physical and spell resistance in there, and Mystic Fortress is a nice damage shield. Then, in our guild lines, we've got Ritual of Salvation from the Fighters Guild, which grants AoE damage reduction, Reverse Entropy from the Mages Guild, which is a solid heal over time, Crimson Font from the Undaunted, which is an AoE heal with a big synergy, and then Skeletal Aegis, also from the Undaunted, which can give us a pretty substantial damage shield from its synergy. Overall, you've got some really solid skills in here, particularly the synergy skills from the Undaunted skill line. Also, something to note is that some of these skills provide things like damage reduction and resistance at a flat rate or percentage rate, meaning it stacks with your named buffs. If you want to be optimal, you'll likely want to dip into these class-neutral skill lines pretty often. So, if you're wondering whether or not you should level the guild skill lines for your companions, I'd highly recommend it because there are some really useful skills in there, especially if you want to make your buddy into a healer. So let's move on to our individual companions, starting with Azandar. His racial passive is the Son of Kozenset. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, I might not be, sorry. Which gives him an extra 3% health and decreases his ability cooldowns by 3%. With him being an Arcanist, he can provide us with a ton of utility as a healer. He's got the Fear the Unknown skill, which can apply fear to enemies. Triptych Physic is a simple burst heal. Shields of Erudition can grant us shields. Zone of Recuperation is a useful AoE heal that can give us some resource recovery. Tendrils of the Colorless Sea can debuff enemies with minor vulnerability. Fate Omen's Inspiration can give us minor berserk if you don't already have it. And his ultimate debuffs enemies with major vulnerability. Overall, his kit doesn't necessarily provide a ton of outright healing without dipping into class-neutral skill lines, but what he lacks in raw HPS, he more than makes up for with his utility. With the sheer amount of name buffs and debuffs he provides, he can be a fantastic support companion for any build, especially if you have enough self-healing to get by on your own. Up next, we've got Bastian, and his racial passive is Tough, which increases max health and damage done by 3%. He's a Dragon Knight, which means he's not the best healer in the world, but he's arguably the best companion at supporting one particular kind of build. For the skills to look out for, he's got Fiery Flail, which sets enemies off balance, Crushing Claws to immobilize enemies, Basalt Barrier can provide us with shielding and an increase to our healing received, Kindle is a decent little burst heal, Searing Weapons can increase our light and heavy attack damage, and his ultimate can stun enemies. So I'm sure you could probably tell there that, especially towards the end, that Bastian is phenomenal at supporting heavy attack builds. If you aren't using one of these builds, then I do think you can find a better companion for general healing and support. For heavy attack builds, though, he's unmatched, honestly. Maybe one companion can kind of give him a run for his money. I'll get into who that is in a little bit, but having him as an extra source of off balance and providing us with a straight up damage increase to our light and heavy attacks makes him the most obvious choice if you use a heavy attack build. Next, we've got Ember, and her racial passive is Cunning, which increases her crit chance and her damage done by 3%. With Ember being a sorcerer, she makes for a pretty good damage dealer. How is she as a healer, though? Well, looking at her skills, we've got Trickster's Trap, which can stun enemies, Entomb to immobilize enemies, Quick Fix as the class burst heal, Second Wind to reduce their own ability cooldowns, and Shared Wards for a combination damage, shield, and heal. So as you can tell, Ember doesn't really have a whole lot of actual healing to put out, similar to a sorcerer. Other than a burst heal and a combo shield heal, she mostly just offers us utility with her stun and immobilization. Of course, it's also worth noting that even though she doesn't have a lot of healing abilities without dipping into class-neutral skill lines, her ability to decrease her own cooldowns does allow her to cast her healing skills more often. And up next is Isobel, and her racial passive is Enchanted, which decreases her ability cooldowns by 3% and reduces damage taken by 3%. With her being a Templar, she has access to some pretty decent heals, and actually some solid utility too. For her skills, we've got Penetrating Strikes, which significantly increases the damage our next light or heavy attack does. Gallant Blitz can set enemies off balance, Spear of Light knocks enemies down, Blessed Sacrament is a nice burst heal with a heal over time, Holy Ground is an AoE heal that can also snare enemies, and Beam of Reproach does damage, healing, and healing over time. So I'm sure as you could tell, Isobel is also great at supporting heavy attack builds. I don't think she's quite as good as Bastian in this regard. However, Isobel does also provide a lot of general support and healing that can be useful for non-heavy attack builds as well. She's generally just a very well-rounded healer and support that can be useful in a lot of different builds and scenarios. Up next is Mirri, and her racial passive is Dynamic, which increases her damage and her healing by 3%. Now, Nightblades generally make excellent healers when used by players. Let's see if the same can be said for companions. For her skills, Shadow Slash can set enemies off balance, Mask of Torment applies fear to enemies, Life Absorption deals damage and can heal an ally, Life Siphon does some damage and heals multiple allies, Blood Transfusion is a nice little heal over time skill, and her ultimate causes enemies to take 20% more damage for a few seconds. Where Mirri seems to shine is being sort of a hybrid damage dealer and healer. Many of her heals and utility skills also do damage, and while she may not do as much healing or have as many utility options as others on the list, she does offer a good blend if that's the sort of thing that you are going for. Next up is Sharp, and his racial passive is Survivalist, which increases his resistances and healing by 3%. He is another class that typically excels in the healing role, which is the Warden. Swoop can set enemies off balance, Infest can provide minor vulnerability, Fungal Forage is a nice burst heal, Petals of the Hunter lets Sharp's light and heavy attacks heal, Perennial Bloom is a nice little AoE heal, Sleep Mail gives us major resolve, Cold Snap can immobilize, and his ultimate can stun enemies. Needless to say, Sharp makes for a fantastic healer. He has tons of named buffs and debuffs, heals, and much more. I can't say I'm surprised considering how strong Wardens are for players. No matter what build or scenario you find yourself in, Sharp makes for a solid all-around healer. Next, we're on to Tanlorin, and their racial passive is Spirited, which decreases damage taken and increases damage done by 3%. They are an interesting combination of Dragon Knight but also Soul Magic, so let's see how they stand out from Bastian. Extinguishing Breath can interrupt enemies, Igneous Armor gives us major resolve, Volcanic Arms gives us major brutality and sorcery, Haze of Cinders can snare enemies and heal us, and their ultimate can knock back enemies. Overall, Tanlorin is similar to our other Dragon Knight Bastian in that they don't provide a ton of healing. However, they do provide some solid utility with things like major resolve and major brutality and sorcery. I do think Tanlorin would be a little better as a damage dealer or a tank than a healer, but still, they do bring enough useful stuff that they can be a pretty solid healer. And finally, we've got Zerith Var, and his racial passive is Third Moon's Chosen, which decreases ability cooldowns and increases health by 3%. As a necromancer, Zerith brings some very good utility for a companion. Dark Moon Totem provides minor protection and fears enemies. Penance of Lorcage is a solid burst heal. Azura's Embrace is a really good cleanse. Atoning Spirit is a good heal over time. Sepulchral Chill provides AoE Major Breach. And Blade of the Crossing provides minor magicka steal. Zerith is a fantastic support companion, providing us with a couple useful buffs, some decent heals, and especially some solid debuffs. AoE Major Breach definitely stands out as a reason that you might want to choose him as your healer. And, speaking of choosing, let's go ahead and head into our last topic of the video. So, now that we've gone over all that, I want to rank each companion based on how they perform as healers using only their class skills. It'd be really easy to slap on some Resto Staff and Undaunted skills and tell you that every companion is a great healer. I want to look at the utility and support that they bring on their own as I'm ranking these. So, Azandar, A tier. Minor Vuln and Minor Berserk are nice, but pretty easy to acquire without a companion. His Major Vuln and solid healing and shielding output makes him a great overall choice though. Bastian, B tier. If you only ever use a heavy attack build ever, you could definitely make the argument that he should be higher. I wanted to rate them though with the assumption that you're not always going to be using a heavy attack build. Ember I put into C tier. She's got some decent heals and utility, but I'd say she's better as a DPS. Isobel is A tier. While a lot of her utility is best paired with a heavy attack build, her great healing output gives her a few points in my book. Mirri, C tier. Due to her hybrid DPS healer nature, her heals are a bit on the weaker side, even with her racial passive. She's still a decent companion, but just honestly doesn't really compare to some of the other companions at healing. Sharp is S tier. He's got an excellent healing output and fantastic utility with Major Resolve and his several debuffs. Tanlorin is in B tier. They've got some decent buffs with Major Brutality and Sorcery and Major Resolve, though they lack the healing output that someone like Sharp or Isobel has, so I had to put them a little lower. And Zerith is S tier. His heals aren't the strongest in the world, but things like AoE Major Breach and Fear, along with minor protection and a cleanse, gives him a wide variety of utility that makes him an overall great support companion. And I think that was everything we had to cover today. Please keep in mind that these are just my opinions from my own testing. I'm not a companion expert, and I'm normally the one doing the healing, not the companion, so if you disagree with me, that's totally okay. Feel free, though, to let me know who your favorite healer companion is down in the comments. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. Don't forget to check out the link in the description so you can follow me on stuff and join my Discord server. Before we head out, I also want to give a quick shout out to my Patreon supporters as well as my YouTube members. Thank you guys for everything you do for me, and I appreciate your support. I think all I've got left to say is that I've been Doc. Take care of yourselves, be good to others, don't forget to thank your companion, and I will catch y'all in the next one.